All right, welcome to the 13th workshop in the Freudian Unconscious. In this workshop, we're going to be covering a paper about the taboo of virginity. It's a paper which takes us slightly out of chronological order with the series as a whole, as the paper's written in 1918. But the reason for the chronological detour is that it's part of a trilogy of papers, which is a continuation of our past workshop on the psychology of love. And in that sense, I felt it was worthwhile to take the detour and just finish the trilogy and explore the paper, The Taboo of Virginity. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen and we'll get right into the paper. All right. So The Taboo of Virginity from 1918. Again, it's the third part in the Psychology of Love trilogy. And Freud starts off here by telling us, as a continuation of his work in Totem and Taboo, in his popular book, Totem and Taboo, which is great context. I'll bring up Totem and Taboo in this presentation, but Totem and Taboo is worthwhile and connected to this shorter paper on the taboo of virginity if you're interested in diving deeper into Freud's thesis on this topic. Basically claiming that primitive peoples put an extremely high estimate on a woman's virginity. This may be sort of surprising and in contrast with a dominant narrative in our contemporary culture that primitive peoples were sexually promiscuous. Freud's claim is that primitive peoples were not sexually promiscuous, sort of having just casual sex and treating sex as just another thing. On the contrary, the taboo around breaking a woman's virginity was so high that he calls it alien to us, alien to modern people, and also claiming that it was the ideal that a woman brought to marriage no memory of a sexual relationship with another man. And one of the reasonings behind this, at least on the surface consciousness level, is that a man's capacity to satisfy a virgin's desire for love by overcoming her first resistances to sexuality is something that's basically unrepeatable. Once sort of the whole process has been set in motion and a woman has had sex, the first resistances to sexuality and the love that's built up through these resistances is not something that can be recreated or perhaps better, re-dramatized. Freud introduces us to a thesis of a theorist named von Krafft-Ebing in the start of the paper, where he basically says, develops his own theory of sexual bondage. And von Krafft-Ebing's thesis is basically that sexual bondage is characterized by a high degree of dependence and a lack of self-reliance, and that this is strangely intensified in a sexual relationship, and that this is sort of brought about by a mixture of love or weakness in one's character on the one side, usually the woman's side, with an unbounded egotism in the other, perhaps typically the man's side. And that this bondage, although creating a high degree of dependence and a high degree of self-reliance, is something that's actually necessary, according to von Krafft-Ebing, for civilized marriage, and that there will be a constant fight against poly tendencies for the continuation of the bondage. Again, this high degree of dependence and lack of self-reliance. One thing that I would say I've seen also on the surface, just to sort of corroborate in some way this thesis, is the idea that most people I see in traditional marriages do have a life that is structured by these characteristics, let's say. With that being said, Freud is critical of von Krafft-Ebing's thesis and basically says that it's not necessarily the weakness of love and the unbounded egotism which is responsible for the sexual bondage, but actually the amount of sexual resistance to overcome coupled with the process of overcoming resistance. So there's this basically this weird tension. There's this weird dramatization around sexuality and specifically the breaking of virginity, which is something which naturally leads to sexual bondage, and that claims that although it's more frequent and intense in women, it has become more intense in modern man, and that there are many strange marriages and tragic events which owe their existence to this weirdness of sexual resistance plus overcoming resistance. And I can definitely also corroborate on the other end as someone who, I'm not married, but I have definitely experienced the power of this sort of weird drive of wanting to have sex, but resisting to have sex, and trying to overcome sex, but not having sex. And that this weird sort of dynamism in the process of resistance and overcoming resistance creates an incredibly intense sexual bond and love bond in many ways. And oftentimes it does seem like they lead to spaces which are strange and oftentimes tragic as well. So now shifting to primitive peoples and virginity itself. Freud's anthropological analysis here is simply that breaking virginity is something that's a taboo and a prohibition with extreme religious value, and that in the primitive cultures, they would have rituals around it where, strangely enough, an elder, a priest, or a holy man or woman would perform the act, maybe not directly intercourse, but some sort of perforation of the woman's vaginal canal, so that basically she bleeds and her virginity is broken, and that this is a ritual basically that does not involve the husband or does not involve the future husband or love partner. There is connection here in the anthropological literature to the importance of shedding of blood, that the ancients considered blood as a seed of life. I thought this was quite similar to the way perhaps the modern man, like a Cartesian subject, would consider the pineal gland as the seat of consciousness. You could see here the ancient man saw blood as the seat of life, sort of connecting it to a life essence. And that consequently the taboo of virginity and also of menstruation here is seen as a type of expression of this seed of life. Now, he goes further to say that the taboo of virginity and menstruation is a taboo that may extend in the ancient mind to the totality of woman herself as a taboo, and all of the things that are unique about woman, all of the things that are perhaps different about woman in comparison to man. For example, the capacity to become pregnant, the capacity to give birth, to be the object of sexual desire, and so forth, that everything connected with femininity was something that the ancient men actually developed a response of dread and developed very strange rules of avoidance, so that they could avoid what they perceived in the woman to be incomprehensible, mysterious, strange, hostile, and also that too close of proximity to woman would be terrifying because it would be perhaps a weakening by femininity. Also connected here in a previous slide to the idea that love is something of a weakness, and Freud's basic explanation for this behavior in ancient man is the castration complex. So the castration complex, for those of you who don't know, is basically about the presence, absence of the penis. And this is obviously deeply developed and important in Lacanian theory. But basically that Freud's idea here is that ancient man dreaded woman, and had all of these responses to woman basically because of the idea that they did not have a penis and they were the sort of the void itself. So Freud's explanation here for all of these taboos around virginity in the ancient world is that ancient peoples were trying to spare the future husband of something dark, which cannot be disassociated from the first sex act. Again, the absence of the penis, that this is something dark, this is the void, and that the woman experiencing this breaking of virginity, this sort of huge symbol of the fact that she is a woman, that she has a vagina, that she is going to bear life, that she doesn't have the penis again. That this is something that ancient men, quote unquote, correctly sensed as a fear of psychological danger, namely the woman's frigidity after the act. And we're going to get into the psychology of this a little bit. But then again, connected to Freud's previous work in Totem and Taboo, the breaking of virginity, he links to the very genesis and the founding of the human family. Although, again, I recommend reading Totem and Taboo in a separate time, because it goes a lot deeper into the genesis and origin of the virginity taboo, but not the place for this particular paper. So the crucial thing here is that the very act of deflowering, the very act of a woman sort of becoming a sexual being, as it were, and overcoming the resistances to that, is that the first sex act can be both painful and represent a type of narcissistic injury and devaluation. And as a result of that, so the crucial thing here is that the future husband in this ritual was spared a association in the woman's mind with this sort of painful event and this narcissistic injury. The idea here in analytic research is that for the woman, and as well as the boy, but here we're dealing with the sexuation after the castration complex, is that there is a universal and powerful allocation of libido, which takes place in a transference to either the father or the brother, or basically masculine figures in the earliest sort of years of the infant's life, and that the husband is already a substitute phallus, is already second place in relationship to the allocation of libido, because the libido was already attached, as it were, to the father and the brother. And in this earliest stages of development, women go through stages of envy to the brother, Freud says, or envy to the father, and they feel, quote, disadvantaged and humiliated due to the lack of penis, basically here coming to terms with sexual difference. And, quote, Freud says, little girls make no secret of their envy. And this is crucial in Freudian theory, crucial in Freudian logic, that we do not listen to what adults say about the castration complex. What adults say about the castration complex is already a defense against the castration complex, as he's emphasizing that little girls themselves make no secret of their envy. It's only later on that once a woman's passed through that she'll deny that this envy ever took place, for example. So this primitive ritual deflowering by an elder, a priest, a holy man, is to substitute for the father and spares the father of what he calls a uncontrolled aggression, where the woman would like to, unconsciously, of course, castrate the husband and keep the penis for herself. Now, I think it's worth noting here that most husbands and most traditional men do appear like castrated entities. They do appear like entities that in some sense lose their masculinity or lose their capacity to embody and perform, their penis, and that the wife here is sort of a castrating element. But what here Freud's saying is that the primitive act and the primitive ritual of using an elder, a priest, or a holy man to substitute the father is sparing him of a type of aggression, unconscious aggression towards him, which would be dangerous. So after the deflowering, the woman switches her consciousness from wanting to have a penis, of course, unconsciously, to wanting to have a child. And so basically, this is the Freudian thesis that, you know, first there is the libidinal energy, which is expressed as the thing in itself, and then in the man it's just the penis itself. And of course, men strongly identify their narcissistic impulse with the penis, whereas woman transitions it to the child, and that's why there's such a strong transference and such a strong bond between the mother and child. And essentially what Freud's saying here is that the child represents basically a phallic plaything for the mother, which is both terrifying and important to reflect on. Now, he go on to say that even when a woman has overcome this castration complex of, you know, the transference of energy from the penis to the child, that a woman's hostility and bitterness towards men, as related to the envy of the penis, never disappears. And that this is clearly seen in the literature of, and this is Freud's quote, emancipated women. Basically here saying that there's a sort of pseudo emancipation here in the ideas and as it relates to psychoanalysis. So this is the final slide, and it's basically the conclusion about defloweration. So there's a weird paradox with virginity, meaning that when a woman first sleeps with a man, this creates a very strong bond, potentially, which a man desires and a woman desires, but it also is coupled with a very strong hostile reaction against him. And I've experienced this myself, this coupling of an incredibly strong bond and an incredible hostility, that they come together in some sense. And it's actually quite terrifying, both the strength of the bond and the level of hostility. And I guess the primitive cultures chose to emphasize the avoidance of the hostile reaction, whereas the modern man and the modern civilization seems to be less concerned with avoiding this hostile reaction, or is in some sense more open to exploring it than the ancient man was. Primitive peoples here, he says, the husband, by avoiding defloweration, is something that's on the psychoanalytic level, something that makes a lot of sense, that it's extremely rational, that it's justified that the primitive peoples had this type of ritual in place. And then he ends with something that I think is actually maybe the most powerful aspect of the entire paper, by claiming that even when women are no longer in love with their first sex partner or their first husband, they're still in a type of psychological bondage with them if they have not brought to consciousness that deep down they want to complete their revenge upon them, and that they have an impulse for vengeance, to destroy the man, to steal his penis, in the Freudian sense. And this is so terrifying, because it means that the person in these love contexts, the woman rather, who loves you the deepest, is actually also an entity that wants to get revenge on you, and that wants to, in some sense, commit a violent act against you. So it's really quite a double-edged sword, to say the least. But that's sort of the paper on the taboo of virginity. And yeah, I mean, I relate to this paper so strongly in many ways, just because there are so many events in my life, both with, like I've broken a woman's virginity before, and I've played around with, these games of resistance and these games of building up resistance. And I've seen also the type of anger and the type of hostility that can come out against you in these situations. So yeah, Mika.
Yeah, I would like to make the first comment here, that perhaps in this paper we have Freud at his most romantic. So that's not a mushy, squishy bubblegum type. Not too bright, but just dark and scary.
It is.
Yeah.
It is very dark and scary. This is a Freudian romance here.
So also, how about that penis envy topic? So I have a proposal. I have made it already earlier that we should call bullshit on Freud first of all. That's like the bottom line. But also there is a good case, including to be made against the topic of penis envy itself, because as some have argued that the first encounter they have when reading Freudian papers or even psychoanalytic discussions today, when they encounter the topic of penis envy and everything related, they may be intelligent people who start to question the assumptions. And when they are intelligent people who question the assumptions, they are left able to overcome the impression that Freud is making a case here, which is implausible, and this perhaps may lead them to dismiss Freud overall and dismiss even psychoanalysis completely. This happens in many, I know psychologists who like to bring up the topic of penis envy because it is kind of like a weapon against Freud, and it works.
In fact, I've only ever heard it brought up as a weapon against him. And in that sense, I'm again brought to the fact that when I pay attention to some extremely intimate moments in my personal history, the concept of penis envy does make a lot more sense. And in that sense, from that perspective, I'm baffled by the fact that I only ever hear penis envy brought up in a negative sense, almost like a joking about how ridiculous Freud is for even thinking about this.
Yeah. Also, I was reminded when you were commenting on it that well, Lacan had this funny comment. I think it's in his lectures on psychosis that the human field is separated from animal field, or its objects are characterized by certain type of competition for the possession of the object, and this type of like jealousy and like rivalry, it characterizes the whole field of human knowledge in a way. And well, there's a funny comment that Lacan made about the connection of testicles to testimony. There's a connection between the Latin word testimonial and I don't know what's the original word in Latin, but the root of the English word testimony and the word for testicles. Just a comment.
Yeah, I do think that this whole field of human knowledge is it's worthwhile to think about it as structured by jealousy and rivalry, and basically around like, the person who has the knowledge being somewhat like the phallus, basically, and that you envy the person who has the knowledge, so to speak. You envy the person who has the phallus. It's also interesting to sort of bring up that in the manosphere, I think this is connected actually to something that was brought up in Samo's a presentation that we were in earlier, was that in the manosphere, there's this whole romanticization of quote unquote the high value man. And that the high value man is really like, the phallus, and that everyone wants the phallus, and that the whole society is structured around the phallus. And that the topic here of penis envy here emerges in the manosphere in kind of like an explicit way. And it's kind of like this central mystery I see in a lot of circles over like, yes, we're in the feminist era. Yes, we're in the digital era. Yes, the patriarchy is falling apart. Christianity is falling apart, and so forth. But there's still this anger and hostility and jealousy and confusion around the position of the phallus and the role of the phallus in society, which I think has to do with here jealousy, resentment, rivalry.
Yeah, and it's really intuitive to connect this type of like discussion of jealousy to the topic of virginity, since Freud is in the beginning, very beginning, identifying the kind of like possessiveness that perhaps mostly men had over a woman as a type of like property to be dealt with in interactions which resemble sort of like a proto-market interactions. But there was this possessiveness, like completely like ridiculous, like trying to possess the like woman.
That's ridiculous, yeah. That's ridiculous, yeah. And it makes me wonder if the ancient man didn't, I don't know, they avoided this, like that the ancient man, you know, they put the rituals in place against virginity so that they could reduce the possibility that a woman would sort of become their possession, or at least develop this super strong bond with them. And that they actually kept distance from women, that they were terrified of women. I don't know, it's a huge paradox, because at the same time, with the modern world being so feminized and being so close to sort of having a more full, vibrant expression of femininity, I wonder if primitive men would just be just absolutely in horror over this. And it also makes me think about my own sort of anxieties about my proximity to femininity, and also my own feminine energy and stuff like this, and that it's connected to a type of weakening. But I think there's a paradox where this is somehow a good thing, that we should go deeper into this in some way. I don't know how else to say it. But it's bizarre. There seems to be some. I don't know what you think of, or if anyone else thinks about it, but it's like that, you know, it's almost like femininity is the unknown, the dark continent, the undefinable, the uncategorizable. And now it's more and more coming to the surface, more and I think inevitably so. And you know, it's uncontained, uncontainable.
Yeah. I would like to ask if you think that do you think that the problem here is with monogamy? Is monogamy the problem? Since Freud says that this is the essence of monogamy, I don't see him explaining monogamy in a logical way. I would say that monogamy in a logical way is a situation where you have the endless field of open possibilities, which is to say, let's say, an open club night. It's a city, you have champagne and you sit on like in a club and watch the women dance and everything. It's all open possibilities. And the logic of monogamy is to place the one exception which is realized. So it is either this is the logic of monogamy. Either you have all the possibilities possible, or you have one actualized instance, one exception which actualizes.
Well, I think what was brought up in the talk we were in earlier about like the central idea of Lacan being, you know, the problem of the not all, you know, and obviously the logic of the not all being sort of connected to the feminine, or the formulas of sexuation on the feminine side, is like, yeah, like we're in this endless field of possibilities, and we're sort of confronting the sort of pain of the not all, and the brokenness of the one, and the impossibility of the one, and yet there's still some sort of paradox with the one, and I don't know what the solution is, but I do see traditional monogamy as a type of neurotic clinging by the man. And like, so I'm going to try and stay as close to my personal experience as possible, is that I see the traditional man clinging to the woman in an image to prevent confrontation with his own death. And then on the other hand, I see sort of the openness of polyamory to be a type of avoidance of real relationship and real sociality. So there's kind of like some middle path between those two, which is very difficult to articulate. Like basically there's something in between the endless field of open possibilities and like traditional monogamy, which is impossible to sort of clearly conceptualize. And it's something almost that needs to be intuitively navigated with like sexual wisdom and like sort of emotional maturity. But, you know, and I think that what's to be found in that paradox is kind of like real social life and real communism and real community, possibly, but it would require a different type of subjectivity. I think you're on mute, Mika.
Yeah. I don't have much to say either, and yeah.
But just that there's this the traditional, like basically the neurotic who wants the all.
It's a kind of a like a symptom. I don't agree with you that it's you know, you seem to bring into mind an unbounded neurotic model. Like if there is like total commitment to one person, it would be like neurosis that has no end. But I see this as to use a classical philosophical term, a universalization that is not perhaps permitted, but I don't know.
I guess, yeah. Does anyone else have anything to say on this topic or specifically about the paper? Go for it.
So I'm sorry, English is my second language, so I might stop a bit.
No problem.
Thank you. So I would mention something about pedophilia. So I'm Asian. So in my observation, I found many young men, they can observe other women, while they can also see how women, maybe just like you once said, trying to revenge, do something crazy. And so they want to stay in the ideology of a traditional way of love, of course, to find women and take her virginity. But they, at the very same time, want to avoid to influence the women or say to get revenge by her. So some people came to the idea that maybe it should find a female which is or who is unable to do something violent. For example, the best object is the overtly young girl. So of course there is no such person around me here. I just observation from the environment. I mean, from where people talk about this, or of course, I have never witnessed any pedophilia explicitly. So I'm concerned maybe is that for those men, the age of a woman is also something similar to virginity. For example, for a girl, the older she is, the more she knows about sex, and you said before, to understand the feeling to get a penis or find a man who has a lot of money. So I think maybe there is just in this case of pedophilia, because I know there might be another kind of pedophilia, which is about fetishization of nothingness. Of course, a child won't have those female beauty in them, for they are immature. So I think, so I don't know if this is really something about taboo or virginity, about of virginity. So I think so maybe maybe so those men, they try to have the um, primitive idea, and at the same time they don't want to face what the woman would do to them. So
I'm not sure if of the question I discern there in terms of is age similar to virginity. I think that it's the actual act of breaking virginity that's important, because it's the sort of the moment where the woman has to experience sort of the, I don't know, the whole process in some sense of being the receiving energy, in some sense of taking inside of herself the man, and also the shedding of blood, and like that is not necessarily connected to age, but more connected.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
My point is that, so we are in a modern society where people have all kinds of information. So some men, they also know this dynamic. So they are trying to avoid this dynamic.
Yes. Like, and the dynamic of breaking a woman's virginity.
Yeah.
Avoiding that.
Yeah, they're trying to avoid that, and
okay.
Or sometimes they are trying to avoid a part of this fact, just like what I said, to intercourse with the child, where the child obviously won't have the idea of what this is about. So they can, in some way, to delay the time they will face this. So I think so. So my concern is that so of course, virginity is about the women's part, but there's another part, the man's knowledge about this virginity. But virginity. Sorry for my bad English.
That's okay. Yeah. So the man's knowledge about virginity as something where you're saying there are some men who are strategically trying to avoid it so that possibly they could avoid the hostile impulses which were in place with ritual in the ancient world, but now are being sort of brought back in the modern world in a sort of different way.
Yeah.
Is that am I interpreting you correctly?
Yes.
Yeah. I've definitely heard a lot of men speak in that way. I've seen, again, it's a paradox, because I've heard some men say they get aroused by the idea of breaking a woman's virginity because they're going to get the strong bond with a woman. And then I've also heard men say what you're articulating, I think, which is the fear around it and, strategically trying to avoid it. So I think it's this double-edged sword where you get the strong bond, but you also get the hostile impulses, because basically, I guess what the man doesn't realize is, or at least is operating unconsciously, is that he's already a substitute for the woman's infantile attachment to the father or the brother. So the fact that you're already the substitute is kind of, I think, what's missed oftentimes, and was probably more apparent in the past. Was probably more apparent.
I have a question. In Alexa Vartman's book 50 Misconceptions About Sex, she talks about the differences of orgasm in a man and a woman. And a man's orgasm is very simple, like everyone knows. And a woman's orgasm is more difficult. The most accessible one she talks about is the clitoris. And there are some others. And then the most powerful one is the womb orgasm, where a woman can come for 20 minutes straight on. And they can feel reverberations of this for days. This is not accessible to a man. Mm-hmm. And isn't it strange that why is there no matrix envy or like vagina envy? Why would a woman envy the orgasm or like the having of the phallus of a man and not the other way around? Because it seems to me that this is this is a clear trait.
Dimitri, are you asking why is there not envy in you? Also, or are you asking universally why there is no envy of this experience?
Both.
There is, I think, a temptation. I think in like Peter Sloterdijk maybe to sanctify the feminine orgasm in philosophical sense, but I think that in a way it's what Zizek would say this type for this type of like sanctifying the feminine orgasm is that it is a masculine fantasy. It is technically to say masculine fantasy, even if it's a woman's fantasy.
But it really can happen. Like this womb orgasm of 20 minutes or even more. And the intensity of it is insane. It's like an almost, from what I've read from it, is that it's a kind of a psychedelic ego death experience.
Yeah, I've been with a woman who's experienced that.
Sounds very fashionable.
Yeah, but I think that, so the question is like, why would there be this asymmetry? Why is there no envy, jealousy for, like, for your example, you're saying the womb orgasm? It might be because, like, if you remember back to our discussion about childhood theories of sexuality, that children they're not even able to think the vagina. Like when they're trying to theorize how a penis could possibly be involved in insemination, they never think about the vagina as a potential sort of, I don't know, it's almost like they can't think the cavity or the opening of the vagina, that only happens later. And so it could be that because the vagina is so complex and because the woman's orgasm is so complex, it could simply be that it's something that we come to be aware of only at extreme or further dimensions of sexual maturation and development. And most of us probably never, there's a lot of people who never even explore this type of sexuality. A lot of women who don't even know about this type of sexuality, for example. But that would be my first guess, is like the penis is so simple. Like the energy, like the enjoyment is so easily accessible, so obviously there. Even with clitoral stimulation, it's just so, it's so simple.
I think that an interesting connection to this idea is to the idea that basically there is, I don't think there is in now that I'm saying it, I'm reminded of this exception, but basically there is no sanctifying the male organ in religion, that is in like explicit discourse. But there are exceptions, of course, but the sanctification comes for the virginity, not for the male organ. So the thing that I was reminded of when saying this was that in like Indian Hindu cultures, they have a sanctified symbol for also penis, but in like religious practice, virginity is sanctified, and the prohibition of on like defloration, according to Freud, is made into a taboo. So there is a connection between like divinity and the feminine, like purity, in a sense, already in religion. So I don't know if the further sanctifying of the feminine orgasm is going to do any difference for this practice. Well, what Freud is saying is that the sexual bondage is stronger in women, and there is a good case to be made for this type of view. And when he's going over the kind of like anthropological reading, he's focusing, he's saying even that the decisive factor that he's observing is the overcoming of sexual resistances. How it is done and what's its amount, and his basic reproach, which is this basic Freudian reproach, is that the people who are observing the anthropological data, they are perhaps too moralistic or frivolous even, or they just don't dare to discuss openly the meaning or the psychical relevance of the type of like small minor differences that occur in the rituals about, for example, defloration.
I also have a question. Okay, in this paper, Freud claims that breaking virginity develops a bondage, but at the same time, it comes together with hostile impulses as well. Yeah. I'm wondering if there is a symmetry, because men lose their virginity as well. I mean, so is there a symmetry? Does the same thing, I mean, develop in a similar way when a man loses his virginity? Does he also develop a similar bondage? And does it also come together with some hostile impulses as well? Or there is asymmetry here? I mean, this is what I'm wondering.
I think it's clearly demonstrating a type of asymmetry. Like at least although it seems like there's a hint towards a historical paradox, because there's pointing towards the idea that this overcoming of resistances and stuff like that is also something which is increasing in men in the modern world. Mm-hmm. Like there's a way in which it's stronger in women in the past and was like perhaps the strongest in ancient men, but that it's being reduced somehow.
So it's also a cultural thing, or maybe biological. I mean,
I think you're on mute. I can't. I'm sorry. I don't know if it's my internet connection, but I can't hear you. I might not be able to hear.
Can you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
So can we say that this is cultural, historical, or maybe it's beyond that? I mean, this asymmetry.
I couldn't hear. I think I might be having internet connection problems.
He was asking if it's biological or cultural, the asymmetry of sexual relationship.
Yeah, okay, I can hear that.
Both and not all. It's both and not all. It's the sexual difference.
Yeah. just hopefully this connection is strong. Yeah, everyone's coming back in. Yeah, Dimitri or Mika, if you could maybe reframe his question or go into what he was saying. I think I missed most of it.
Yeah, sorry, I think I had a problem with my internet connection. Can you hear me now? Do you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you now.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, is it so this asymmetry is something cultural, historical, or there is something more that
I think
explains this?
I think like to what like Mika was pointing towards, where it's both and not all, is that and this is here drawing on Freud's idea that this virginity taboo can be traced back to the genesis of humanity itself. It's kind of like it's kind of like the background of the not all. It's kind of like,
I see.
Like God has to subtract himself in order for human history to unfold as time. It's like it's like human the temporality of human beings is possible because of the absence of the phallus.
Way that I would say would be that it is perhaps not legitimate to ask for whether it is biological or cultural, or if you can continue to list forever, perhaps even just include any topic. This is the point about sexual differentiation, that it eludes all basic categorization.
Yes.
So the categorization tries to grapple with the excess, and the basic picture that emerges about sexual difference is that the one cannot be one. The one is always one and a surplus. And the way that the surplus functions is that the surplus isn't a differential item. The surplus is an internal crack to the one, and differential items, let's take, for example, an apple, an orange, and a pear, and so on. That's differentiation. But we have something else in here. And,
yes.
And, yeah.
What I always said, it's a difference before a difference, not a difference that makes a difference. Like in information theory, you have a difference that makes a difference. So like an apple, a pear, a banana. But this is kind of like a difference which precedes all differences. That's sort of how I've tried to conceptualize it in my head. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
I would like to say something. Hello. I think it's not asymmetry. I think it's a biological difference. I want to say that in my opinion, this Freudian theory is a man-centered theory. It's a patriarchal one. And I don't think that women have, but I will try to do what Cadell does, and I respect it so much to talk first person talk, not objectifying or generalizing. So this penis envy, for me, it's bullshit. I'm sorry to say that. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe.
You're allowed to think it's bullshit, Alexandra.
Excuse me, what?
You're allowed to think it's bullshit.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I think that the problem what Lucial brought is very important. It's about the question of pedophilia, and I think another problem much more important than this so-called asymmetry is the problem of innocence and of power. So if a woman has the power and the man is innocent, then the whole story turns around, you know. So then the woman is initiating and learning and perverting and whatever the man. So it depends who has the power, not who is man and who is woman. That's my opinion. And that's why it's so important not to abuse and not to transform the other in an object. So it's not so much a problem of being a woman or being a man, but it's a problem of way of relationship, the way you relate to the other, and the way to respect the freedom of the other and not transforming him in an object of use and abuse. So that's my problem, because oh, and also what Evren said, that if both of them are virgins, but usually one is more initiated than the other, and then the other is more innocent. So I think that's the problem of power, of ethics, of abuse, of love, of respect, of the freedom, of the sensitivity of the other, not so much if you are a woman or a man. So, and I would like to ask, what about the relation between Mr. Freud and his daughter Anne? Or between the relation between Lacan and his daughter and his son-in-law or whatever. So we have to look to these very important and wonderful men, Freud, Lacan, and all the men from the psychoanalysis, as being incomplete persons who are not able to be a woman. So they have an incompleteness. They just have this complex of not understanding something and trying to compensate the mystery of the woman. And every one of them is trying in his way. But let's give a chance and a voice to the woman too, to the women too, without being afraid of that. Sorry.
Can I make a comment that's about an earlier discussion here? A side rail. Maybe it connects to this idea of the universal, like everybody joining together and being respectful and so on. But if we think of, as Carol suggested, about neurosis as the universal model of like monogamy, I think that it might miss a mark in a sense, but I don't know if you guys agree. I think that the I'm sorry, I'm not an analyst, so I'm not proficient in diagnosing anything. I'm just my interest is purely speculative. Like I'm just curious about how the notions like relate, but the objection that I would like to bring to Carol's idea that the universal model of committed relation to one woman, just one object, is that it is a form of neurotic symptom. I would say that in my experience, it might better be suited to discuss it in terms of perversion. It's a pervert's like symptom. But I'm not a specialist, so I don't know.
Hey, sorry guys, I'm back, but my internet, yeah, internet connection issues. Sorry, I didn't hear actually Alexander's last point, but we'll keep let's just keep going on.
Yeah, I had just a very short derailing of the discussion at this moment, because I wanted to return to the earlier comment that you made, that model of like monogamy would be a neurotic symptom. I disagree, since I think that it's maybe perversion. It's a pervertic symptom.
I don't think monogamy is only a neurotic symptom, but I think it's more like the way in which the man attaches. Like, it depends on the way the man's attaching. Like, the type of attachment I'm talking about is the type of attachment where, if the man were to lose the woman as this object that he's clinging to with his emotional energy, then he would just collapse into nothingness. Like, he would rather death. This is sort of more what this is what I've seen, what I'm pointing towards.
But this is such a nice experience. Why not? Just do it. Experience.
Sure.
This,
well, if a man wants to do it, if a man wants to do that, he can. And many do. But I would question the motion, in the sense that he may be undermining his own being if he would rather die without her. I don't know. I mean, it's not even up for me to say. I'm just saying that's what I've seen.
Usually they don't die.
They don't do too well. Yeah. But I take your point from what you were saying about, I think it's actually quite interesting what you're saying about, Freud and Lacan being unable to understand woman, and that they're trying to compensate for the mystery of the woman. I don't necessarily think that it undermines this particular theory, but it does, I think, point towards the mystery of femininity and the capacity of a man, or the capacity of a subject in a male body, to explore the feminine and to be more comfortable with it, potentially.
Now, I would like to apologize, because it was just a reaction. I think women, I think both Freud and Lacan helped a lot the women to emancipate. So I'm very grateful to those two men. And Freud said that the woman is a mystery. The woman, the music, and the mystic.
Yeah.
They are mystery for him. So he helped a lot to women, and he understood more than the majority of men this feminine mystery. And Lacan said, la femme n'existe pas. And he also was aware of this void, of this.
Yeah. Well, that's basically what I'm saying. I'm saying that the man needs to go into the nothingness. The man needs to go deeper and deeper into the nothingness.
Okay, very good.
That's basically what I'm saying. Yes,
but they are afraid. They are afraid of doing.
I know they are. I know, but that's what I'm trying to point towards, is instead of putting all of your intimate energy onto another human being, go into the nothingness itself, embody it, feel it.
The ideal that I am immediately reminded of is Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator. That's the ideal. The eternal worker never gives up. It's like full commitment. There was a good comment in the chat, or question perhaps. How is being monogamy connected with the fact that a man collapses after a breakup? I can tell an example. When I had my first serious relationship, I was fully committed and I thought that this is going to last forever. But in the end, it was childish and stupid, and it didn't make. So how is being monogamous is connected? It's by complete mental devastation. It's a complete breakdown. It's like,
yeah,
maybe you have alcoholism or even worse, but yeah, I had my vices. I had a permanent like nasty memories, but also a loss of relief from like terrible relationship. So the way that they are connected is by complete catastrophe, I would say. It can even leave, I think that it might even leave like a permanent mental scar or trauma if a person goes after a really bad breakup.
Yeah, I would second that. It's because the man is basically, look, the man's mind is basically a slave to the sexual energy or the libidinal energy. And when all of that energy gets concentrated on like the first woman he falls in love with, basically, if that woman removes herself from his life, he's just going to collapse in on himself. And all I'm saying is that going into that directly is the path to greater and greater self-destruction potentially, or sorry, greater and greater self-discovery potentially. That's just, I mean, take that for what it's worth. I'm not saying that that's universal or something, but it's been my experience at least.
But why would I think there, if we continue on this idea of penis envy, then since the woman is kind of the matrix itself, this
yeah,
like the mystery also of music, I think it's very interesting that what Freud says is that when a man goes and he has sex with a woman, this is a feminization, some kind of feminization of the man, and that's why it's also scary to the man. Also, what's scary to a lot of men is dancing. It's holy shit, I'm being totally feminized, dancing to music. So why does he still continue to say, but no, it's the woman who wants something we men appear to have? Why don't we men want to dance and be like, you know, the woman? Yeah. Why aren't we envious of the vagina?
I think, but maybe I'm wrong. A problem for the man, even if I don't know because I'm not a man, is his relation to his mother, because first is the mother and then is the man. And this is a very special fusional relation. And then all the life, the man tries to detach, to separate himself from this nostalgia of that fusional relation.
And connected to what Alexander...
To a woman.
Yeah.
So that's why I agree totally to Kadel, and I respect very much what you said. It's this courage of facing nothingness, of losing identity. And only after that, you can start to play with your androgyny, to be man and woman, to accept one and the other. But it's not easy because you really have to face some lack, some void, something that at the beginning is very scary, but in time you get used to it, and it starts to be interesting and complex, I think.
I agree with that. And I would say to Dimitri's question, it's that both the female and the male baby want the phallus to show to the mother. Like, it's like whenever a little child wants to do something to impress the mother, like, look at me, mom, look what I can do. You're trying to impress the mother. And the reason why it's the starting point for both the male and the female baby is because they both come from the mother. They're fused with the mother.
But would it also a good example be a really like impressive politician giving a great speech it's all about the possession of mother, but also like really a cunning banker, really hoarding money up. These are also like trying to love the mother, or the brilliant scientist trying to
they're all the same.
Impress.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all the same. It's all trying to do a dance for the mother. You know, like for the scientists, nature is the mother. You know, like for example, it's kind of ridiculous, but like in some of the manosphere circles, like when they talk about like getting a lot of money and being able to make a lot of money, they're doing it ultimately so that they can impress women.
Just to get the like original object. It's a constant search and constant struggle, but isn't it really crazy that Lacan, I think, says that we are seeking from the mother. It's just one like letter away.
Yes.
And the other is here symbolic, like symbolic dresses to social relations, basically.
So what would be the connection to the mother, as in M and then other, and the name of the father?
The name of the father is basically the phallus that's good enough for the mother, I think. That's what the subject's trying to do in some sense, is to become the name of the father.
From the Lacanian point of view, I think the name of the father is the law.
The law, yeah.
Is the law, the signifier, the law.
Yeah.
And the mother is the void, is the cora, the nothingness.
Mm-hmm.
That place where you lose yourself, I think, as identity. And but I would like to go back, if you accept, to the problem of Lucial, the problem of power, and of pedophilia, and of using power in sexual relations. And how do you think about that from an ethical point of view? Why about this abusing of the weak, abusing of the innocent?
Wait, I think it's more about something.
How do you see it from this point of view of power relation?
I mean, I don't think that there is a sexuality without power in some sense. Power plays a role. It's like I think in relationship to what you were saying about, you know, basically trying to go away from a substantialist argument to a relational argument vis-a-vis power. You're just articulating the position of the phallus, whether or not it's the woman or the man who's in that position. Like you made reference to the idea that, you know, a woman could also abuse a man and hold power over him, and if he's more innocent and if he's less experienced, and it's just that she would be in the position of treating the man like an object in some sense.
Yes.
And she would be the phallic signifier in this position.
I remember there is an essay called Assertion of Certainty by Lacan, which is about 3 prisoners. I think it's also coined in Zizek's joke. The first chapter, the first page, the very first page, 3 female prisoners are trying to figure out who is behind them. There are 5 men. 3
is
black.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
2 is white. And I think there might be something with what I am Alexandra said. So for a man, he has I have to repeat this old simple ontological trope or something. So for a man of high value, he often sees the problem. Do you love me, or do you love my money instead? So for man, he has to assert the certainty that whether the female in front of me is loving me or loving my characteristic. So I think in our modern days, there are some alternative virginity, like what Alexander said. For being innocent, a boy can be innocent, and elder women can see him as an object. So why do I say the 3 female prisoner joke? So this is about the man. He already know the dilemma that some women are trying to find a man paying her bill. So now the game is on the second level. The man knows some women are trying to hide the fact that she is trying to find a penis, while she pretended that she is trying to find a true love. Of course, she is only for his money. So yeah. So on this level, from what I know, Trump, the American president, has once sexed a young girl. This is on the news, and there are rumors about England prince, all kinds of princes in some other country, and men of high value, and even some of my colleagues, they have a higher position than me. Some of them also appears to believe in such thing. So I think there might be some alternative virginity, that because in ancient there is some unflowering. So I think in modern days there is still some symbolic unflowering. For example, for a child in his childhood, he is not allowed to interact with the outside world. I know this is not the case. I hear in Western country, there are laws about prohibiting or punishing parents for letting younger child to play with elder child or adults. Of course, this is not the case in Asia. So I think, but child has to interact with the outside. So maybe the school's teacher are the modern priest, of course. So teachers are also adults, but teachers seems to be some exception. So
like a teacher tries to be like the follows for the mother, as we spoke earlier, like the teacher who tries to please perhaps the customer or even the student. They are trying to impress the other so that they get the mother.
Yes. Yeah.
Can I read from Lacan's The Signification of Phallus? It's just a short quote from the opening, which I think relates really to our topic today. Lacan opens the paper with we know that the unconscious castration complex functions as a knot in the dynamic structuring of symptoms in the analytic sense of the term. In other words, in the dynamic structuring of what is analyzable in the neuroses, perversions, and psychoses. And secondly, in regulating the development that gives its ratio to this first role, namely the instanting in the subject of an unconscious position without which he could not identify with the ideal type of his sex or even answer the needs of his partner in sexual relations without grave risk, much less appropriately meet the needs of the child who may be produced thereby. So, yeah, I'm wondering what your view, how does, I mean, the overall topic about phallus itself is what's the idea about the relation was earlier. So
how would you relate that how would you relate that quote from Lacan on the castration complex to the taboo of virginity, say, that were?
Well, it's just about the possession. Very simple idea. It's a castration complex that is already. I mean, it's genius by the way that Lacan opens the paper on how significant is the paper on the signification of phallus. That's the question.
I have a question.
Go for it.
My internet is cutting in and out, so I don't know if you've already discussed the part in the Taboo of Virginity about the first time and its significance, which then disappears in subsequent acts of sex within a marriage. We
haven't discussed that specifically, no.
Okay, I just wonder if that's significant here, this part of the conversation. I don't remember whether it was in Taboo of Virginity or something, another work talking about this paper. But in cultures where the first act of sex within a marriage, or just with a woman in general, whether it's intercourse digitally or defloration with an act of coitus, each culture has its own way of making the first time more significant than all of the subsequent acts, with some form of prohibition, right? I think that was worded really poorly, but I just wonder, there's one instance in particular where it's seen as necessary for a woman or somebody other than the husband to deflower the woman, because something symbolic like a snake exists in the vagina of the woman that might come out and sting the penis of the husband. So to protect the husband from that, somebody else has to be the one who does it. Of course, it's like never explained what happens to the snake after the first instance of this. I just wonder if this is connected to the significance of the phallus, as I thought we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think, well, you're bringing up something that's to me is really important, which is, and it's something like our culture, I guess, doesn't sort of approach or regulate anymore, but it's just that in order for a woman to become herself sort of emotionally mature, at least in this paper, Freud's kind of describing a process where she has to come to terms with an unconscious impulse to be the phallus herself, and that this kind of breaking of virginity is a crucial moment where she's confronting her own void. She's forced to confront her own void, and that anybody who is relationally attached to that event is potentially at risk of a hostile aggressivity, basically. And so how do we handle this as a culture, to me, is the question. I think that it has to be I don't know. I don't even know the conditions of possibility for that to be handled by the culture, but it's just kind of happening anyway. But like the consequence of it, the consequence of a woman not confronting it, to me, is that she's always going to have this frigidity where she won't be able to own her sexual energy, and she'll always have a type of aggression towards men, which is displaced or projected in a certain way.
How does this manifest in this new culture that's forming, where the first time for the woman is not seen as significant as this anymore?
I think this is like the interesting historical dimension of Freud's argument, which is like what I see is, again, like this, and this is Freud. So there is kind of like, at least at this stage in his career, like this teleological progression that emerges in his writing, where you have this image where in primitive man, there is the absolute taboo on virginity. And this is to avoid the hostility that potentially could emerge. And then as man becomes more civilized, it's almost like there's a trade-off that occurs where they're not concerned as much about this initial hostility, but they're more a trade-off with ensuring provisioning and protection for the woman, which seems to be sort of a going for the strong bond, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answers your question or if anyone else has a view on that, but I don't know.
Not really. It was really interesting question and discussion. You phrased it beautifully, both of you, I think.
Yeah, it's a super tough one to think. I'm struggling with articulating how I feel about it. But the reason why I'm struggling is because I'm trying to balance in my head like a theoretical explanation with like personal experiences I've had, because it's just they're impossible to disentangle. But what I have seen, that when a woman doesn't sort of confront the hostility of this initial event, that it persists inside of them, and that they will try to get revenge against the man in unconscious ways, but it will be all through displaced hostility. Like it will be hostility about things which have nothing really to do with the initial problem, the problem of castration, and create a whole bunch of, unnecessary tensions. So I don't know how the culture handles it. But
sometimes I feel like the current like sex positive culture encourages women to have as much sex as possible.
Yeah.
But basically to never allow herself to be deflowered at all.
Can you go into that? What do you mean by that?
It's sort of like if all of these rites in different cultures that revolved around the significance of the virginity of the woman were about overcoming an initial perhaps traumatic event that would lead to frigidity or some sort of undesirable tensions in a marriage or in a relationship in the future.
Yeah.
Currently, I would say that's sort of either on its way out or already considered an archaic idea of how relationships and long-term bonding should be founded or should be carried out. So sometimes I think women are encouraged to explore their sexuality, but to never overcome that frigidity that's always sort of trying to present itself.
Yes.
So instead of like, get rid of this because it'll ruin your marriage, hold on to this because it's your power. Or
yes.
Hold on to this because it's what keeps you safe from the thing you don't want to confront, which is, you could say,
which is not having a penis.
Yes. Yeah, that's what okay, so that makes sense to at least one of you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I see that as well. I see that as well.
That's so funny.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Mika.
Funny. But I think that's a brilliant way of putting it, that they are really like so eager to discuss and go into sexuality, and it's all about like some type of like castration problems that they are personally trying to overcome. But yeah.
Isn't this also
sex positivity? I would like to connect it to just one example that Zizek gives about what's the mode of sexuality that fits our current society. It's this idea from San Francisco about a masturbation marathons, and they give medical reasons. I mean, Zizek lists about 10 reasons that they give, and Zizek has his own counter examples in the book Violence. Read it. So go on, Dimitri, sorry.
Yeah, no, to add to your point, that what Zizek also says is that perversion is the highest stage of repression. And of course, like, to just keep encountering sex, but staying cold to the real pragmatic core of it is perverse.
Yeah, Blaise Pascal, I think maybe would fit perversion in a sense. But I'm not an analyst, remember, I'm a philosopher.
Yeah, I think, and what you're saying, Dimitri, I think that really captures, I thought, what Ray is trying to articulate about contemporary permissive sexuality is that it chooses a type of weird perversion, which is like this endless deferral of confronting yourself. Like you're deferring actually confronting the core of yourself by being a liberated sexual entity.
Here in the in the Netherlands, a small example is that I recently saw that we have a state-funded TV program. It's also on YouTube, and it's like 3 women, and they talk about everything sexual, but it's made for like 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds.
Right.
And it's like they go into anal sex, into masturbation, into sperm, but in a very perverse way. It's very cold and like you do you, and it's not like, I don't know, it's very
Do you think
strange,
it's masculine?
it's not intimate.
Do you think that it's still masculine in a sense? Even if it's women, like?
I don't even dare to. I think it's something interesting that Alexa Vartman talks about in 50 Misconceptions in Sex is that butch lesbians, so these are more the masculine lesbians, that often when they have sex, they fantasize about having a penis. So I think Freud has something to say about this.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's also the fact that women, whether they're butch or lesbian or otherwise, fantasize about having a penis in sex.
Yeah, I've seen lots of memes about this. A lesbian is just a woman who's enacting her penis envy and trying to dramatize it in some way. I know in lesbian sex the phallus is there in lesbian sex. Like in lesbian sex, the phallus isn't absent. No, it's like it's there. It manifests in various forms, whether in toys or symbolically.
I have a question about this because I typed out a comment about that there is a fakeness to masculinity, because if you go to the manosphere, they talk about being the man, being the one with the phallus, but always in the end this phallus is there only for the mother. So you're a mother's boy who just wants to run back to his mom. But this is of course the least masculine thing ever, though there's still a kind of paradox here, because if a child doesn't choose to become a man, we call this man a man-child. And this is just a very saddened state of a man. But on the other hand, like, why would a woman want something that is fake? Like the matrix or the womb or the vagina, this is not fake. This is real. This is the real nothingness, the real void. But the phallus is ultimately it's fake, and it's just for the womb, for the matrix.
I think you make the distinction about the realness of masculinity in the man-child and the emotionally mature man. And I would say that like the emotionally mature man is like the emotionally fake man is obviously pretending to be the master when he's not. And then I guess the emotionally mature man would be someone who, I don't know, is it like he knows he's not the master, but he, I don't know, still has some almost weird authority in the lack. I don't know.
It persimove.
Yeah. And if we had like this perfect idealized person who is the most like sexually informed person ever to have existed, the fantasy would still be like that's what I'm trying to say. It would be this perfect operator, the like machinist from do you know this movie Machinist, where not to go any of the, yeah, but it's basically like Arnold Schwarzenegger or the Machinist, or this cold and completely like devoid of sexual substance. And that's the point that I think either Alenka Zupancis or Zizek or both of them try to make, that the like culture of trying to educate and be open about sexuality and try to perform sexuality in a correct way, it's an attempt to overcome sex itself. It's a trouble with sex. So the way to overcome the trouble of sex is paradoxically enough to eliminate sex, right? That's what they try to do, eliminate sex itself.
I have a question. What do you think about the sacredness of sex and the sacredness of virginity?
I think that like that's an interesting question, because like it's sort of connected to like primitive man has this idea that it's extremely sacred. And I think in our current culture, we've had the desacralization of sex. It's now kind of like, you know, sex is kind of like junk food, or sex is kind of like, you know, just commercialized or just another commodity. And I wonder if it signals something about like I don't know, like the end of our species. Like, because if Freud is saying that the totem, and if Freud's saying that the virgin taboo can be traced back to the origin of our species, I think if sex becomes totally meaningless, then it would mean the end of human social relationships in some sense. I know Alenka Zupančić just pointed to this as well. And in that sense, like, I feel like with the dissolution of real social bonds, and like really the dissolution of real social bonds being kind of like this immersion in a digital world, like look at all of us right now interacting digitally. It's like, yeah, does it signal in some sense the end of what we've come to know of as like human history, human social relationships? Like it's yeah. Like, does human society require that sex is kind of like this taboo, sacred taboo, which is somehow used in an indirect way to found communities?
No, I think it's about, because I'm Asian. Asian people has less children now, so yeah, our born rate is very low compared to America. I remember for America it is 2. For China, Japan, Korea, it's only 1 or less than 1. So what I noticed here is that many young people, when they are masturbating, they rely on some video or picture that indicate some subject supposed to enjoy. So the most explicit thing would be women to masturbate by watching another woman, imagine, fantasizing that she has a super vagina that provides much more enjoyment when having sex than other women do. So, and as I noticed, many Asians are more relying on this subject supposed to enjoy other than the older primitive secret of sex to maintain the will to get sex satisfied. So I think maybe to keep virginity as a taboo is also a point to keep people producing child. So I think sometimes it works like the another party which is supposed to do something, like supposed to believe or supposed to know. About subject supposed to know. I would like to propose another kind of thing. So we have the subject supposed to know, but maybe we can have inverse the kind of the subject. The subject is supposed to don't know. For example, I think maybe that's something about virginity. So for
yes.
So yeah.
Yes, the subject. Yeah, that's a nice connection.
So back to the topic of child. So we are all so in the market. I call it a market because the higher value men trying to find beautiful women, and the women are trying to find a good man. So I call it a market, and literally it's the market in the world. So we are all in this dilemma that we are trying to hide our intention because
yes,
those true innocent people are very rare. So if other people marry them, I will get less chance. So now we have this game, just like the Zizek or the Lacan and the Zizek following using the 3 female personal game. So people are all trying to marry a symbolic virgin, not a real virgin, but instead a symbolic virgin. Those who are supposed to not know this crazy game. So, and my demonstration is that, for example, the American president, he is high value, and he's a president. He must know the truth of social relations. So for him, he absolutely know that women are trying to seeking substitute alternative penis instead of loving Trump himself. So he changed his strategy. He intercourse with those subjects supposed to not know this. The subject supposed to not have this impulse for a penis. So I think so it had, I think the modern conception of virginity has become some ontological virginity instead of whether
that's really good.
Whether the I don't know the name for it. Maybe hymen. I don't know the apart. Oh, nice. I remember.
No, it's super interesting what you're saying, and like I almost like I don't know if this is going to be connected, but like I almost want to ask this question because you keep on bringing up, you know, the Asian cultural background is like it is sort of like the case throughout the developed world, but it's almost hyperinflated in Asia that you know, the fertility rate is falling, and people are having fewer and fewer children. And also, like, somewhat connected to that is the sort of the explosion of obsession with hentai and being sexually aroused by cartoons and.
Oh wait, about hentai,
like
I remember in Less Than Nothing, the preface of Less Than Nothing, Chichiko says something that female organism is a proof of the existence of God. Actually, I think that is exactly what those Asians are trying to do. Because just like what I said, even if I'm a woman, I'm still imagining a better vagina. So female organism is not about those biological pleasure, but more about a proof of God, the true hidden happiness. I know in Japan, people are trying to live in a Buddhist way to have less desire, because of course the Japan economy is not as great as before they have. So I think what's your point again? I'm sorry.
I would agree that hentai is a really good like subject for discussion, and the word hentai in Japanese is basically the word for a pervert. I mean, they would use hentai about some guy who is like in Western, I mean English, a pervert.
Yeah, I know what is hentai. Actually, I work in the cartoon and the video game domain. Ring. Yeah, I'm a worker of Asian media. Actually, I'm some kind of a supervisor at or general. I work like something who my job is, my work in reality is to decide what kind of event, what kind of narrative we should have. Actually, I actually fully know what those hentai are. So I think for I don't know actually. So
I just wonder if I wonder if like in Lacanian language like this, like the insistence of the signifier or the continued movement of the phallus is sort of abstracting itself into the virtual and sort of creating instead of actually marrying a physical woman, you just create a virtual woman and you have a relationship with a virtual woman, and you can have a virgin woman because she's just virtual, just made up in your head. And like you can sort of like, is that happening? Like, are there sort of fundamental paradoxes of physical human sex which are being reconciled in virtual mediation through hentai, through drama, through
drama narrative?
Yeah, through drama of the virtual.
Actually, I know how these narratives are made. First, you have by the way, do you know the movie Kimi no Na wa, Your Name, the famous Japanese movie? Your Name. I don't know if anyone knows that. That is exactly the same as Zizek point in the guide, the poet guide in ideology, the Fall of Berlin. The first, and there really has a catastrophe, a physical catastrophe, and to as an outside obstacle for the audience to imagine a true love. So of course I'm a worker of narrative. By the way, I'm a Chinese. Hentai are illegal in China. So of course I'm not producing. So of course I'm not an illustrator who paint actual hentai, but I'm a person who is trying to provide the same religious experience as if you are watching a hentai. Why hentai is the attempt to produce the same religious experience when in a true romantic event. So and Zizek said the real is cold, but the virtue is more real than the reality. So especially in Japan, this is the case that the wife in the screen is more vivid than women in my environment for
right.
Yeah.
It's super fascinating. And I think the same thing is happening in the West. I think the same thing is happening, at least with the decline of reproduction and the transference basically of libidinal energy into the virtual on a mass scale.
Yes.
And it's definitely cross-cultural.
Isn't the trend also, according to Zizek, that in the West we are approaching a state all the time where in the future we are going to have capitalism, but not without Western values, but with Asian values. So the shift is here from West to East in politics also. And politics is always connected to sexuality. Like regimen of sex and so on, control of the bodies. I mean, this is the whole like Foucauldian topic of the like order of law, how it quantifies one person for one crime, from one like crime. I mean, you have one body and you have a police and you can quantify a body. So if there is a crime identified, then you have quantified a crime which needs to be charged, and the judge will deal with the whole scale thing, I mean, and so on.
I think that's really interesting about this prediction of future politics shifting towards those of the East.
Yeah. Can I make a comment also on this that short one? I was today walking down the street in Helsinki, and my like impression today is that the cultural states here tries to imitate Japan or Tokyo 20 years ago, I'd say. I mean, we are now in Helsinki where Tokyo was 20 years ago, basically. It's overly aestheticized, like in the streets. Everybody's trying to be like a style.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I came across when I was reading about virginity and in different places, apparently certain cosmetic procedures involving reconstruction of the hymen is on the rise, especially in the East, where like the business of trying to make a woman appear like she is still intact is something that more and more people are interested in paying for. Their goal is it seems like they can't get rid of the tradition that puts so much importance on the hymen and being intact. But culture itself has changed so much in that time. It seems like there's more and more people that are like, well, I'm just going to continue doing whatever it is that I was going to do anyway. But because this is so important to how my future looks, I will, at the end of all of that, then reconstruct my hymen and then go about my marriage as if I was the virgin that my culture wanted me to be until now. Right? There are some doctors that are even saying this is a feminist action to allow women this choice of living their life as a liberated woman, but then also come back and say, no, I am the woman that you wanted me to be also. So let me play that game as well as the one that I'm playing on this side that you shouldn't know about.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I've read about this as well.
To me, it sounds really phallic. Like it's a phallic, like never ending, like production.
Well, by trying to reconstitute the hymen like virtually and recreate that simulation, they're basically doing that for the gaze of the phallic gaze.
Yeah, like and the men in these communities also play their part in it, in that they expect the woman to prove that she has not tried to fool him in that way.
Wait, can you just pretend that you have no sex experience instead of reconstruct it?
Excuse me, I would like to ask you, we talked just about some anatomical virginity till now, but can we talk about another kind of virginity? Let's say soul virginity, or
well, I think Freud's saying that virginity,
transcendental virginity. What is virginity? What is virginity?
In this paper, Freud places a lot of emphasis on the fact that when we're talking about virginity, it's really what we're talking about is a psychological state. Like both the psychological distress of the man and the psychological sort of negativity of that the woman goes into is you know, the actual anatomical representation of the virginity is sort of secondary to the psychological dimension, which is why I think that's also crucial for psychoanalysis, is not to reduce any of the theories in psychoanalysis to purely biological explanations, but that we're always dealing here with the psyche.
I have a question. What do you think before the fall, Adam and Eve, before the fall, they were virgin? They were virgin?
Well, okay. What are we talking about the myth? Are you trying to give a literal interpretation?
Is there a state, a psychological state of virginity that you can reach? Or not?
I always felt biblically the state of virginity in the Garden of Eden was before they ate of the fruit of knowledge and realized that they were naked. Not before they had sex, right? It was before they realized what they should be ashamed of, or before they let go of whatever you can call innocence now that some people expect women to retain until marriage or possibly for the rest of their lives.
I think this is a fake. The real virginity is this feeling of innocence, and you can have it.
Yeah, and God himself also falls in Jesus Christ. That's the joke.
Thank you, Rhea. Thank you, Rhea. I agree.
Sorry, Mika, I didn't hear what Mika just said. Mika, could you?
Yeah, sorry, I was just saying about fall. I mean, God himself falls.
That he said that's the meaning of Jesus Christ, is that God himself falls.
Yeah, it's a paradox, since how can it be a particular like this individual here? Why? It's a paradox and an impossibility.
The idea is that only in there's something unique about Christianity in the fact that
because God,
as a part of Christianity,
God himself falls.
Exactly. That God himself is a finite mortal human being, whereas in previous religions, God was, of course, different from a finite mortal human being.
But through the Virgin Mary, was this possible?
Through the Virgin Mary.
The condition for this possibility was the Virgin Mary and her her approval.
Yeah, and no questions about or the shady sexual origins of the baby. Like, no, there's nothing shady, since it's God himself who inseminated.
Joseph could have just
been no like queries about the shady origins.
No, I think it's a very serious problem. A very serious problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Luciel, I don't know if that's how you pronounce your name. Did you have a question about the hymen?
About hymen?
Yeah, I thought you asked something about the significance of the reconstruction of the hymen.
Yes, so actually, when I'm at first, I don't know what this is about. Actually, in my company, there are some trade secrets Yes, trade secret, you call it. So the trade secret says the hymen is not a thing at all. Nobody really give a fuck of it, but people really care the conceptual, the notional statue of the women's mind or her condition. So I think isn't in the real world, because at least in Asia, it's very humiliating to ask a woman, "Oh, are you a virgin?" So for women, even if you are not a virgin, you can still pretend that you are a virgin. And actually, most of the Asian men are not really able to distinguish those who had or have not. So of course, I actually don't know what a woman would do. Oh, by the way, my name pronounced like Elucia. The first letter is actually capitalized I instead of L. So my question is that so why the people should why the women should be constructed? Because by the way, there's a Chinese joke here. A slut is trying to marry a wealthy man, and she claimed that she is a virgin. And when they first had sex, the man got angry because they cannot find a hymen. The women said, "Yeah, I love riding bicycle." So of course, this is a joke most of the Asian could understand, because when you are riding a bike,
yeah,
the
ride a bike,
the one, the break the hymen. So yes, so basically you can't basically. So I think so is I can't understand why the people use so why they so I don't understand if it is the case in the West that the people still use the physical hymen instead of pure virtual hymen, just like what Trump and Japanese did. A women who know nothing about the true marriage or romance market game.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it, but this is not specifically in the West, but more in the Middle East and in communities in the West that have a high population of people who are coming from places who place a lot of importance on the physical anatomical virginity. Like the rise in incidence of these surgeries taking place, but also about that, there's also, it seems to be an understanding of that fact that the actual anatomical signifier of the intact hymen is not a real representation of any kind of psychological state of innocence or anything. So it's sort of like the women that are doing this are saying there are so many reasons for which I might not have an intact hymen, but the culture that I exist in considers it important anyway to show some sort of purity in one way or another. We already know that there are many ways for this to, like there are many exemptions to this, right?
For the sake of bigada.
Yeah, for the sake of, if you're trying to secure your future and you know the best way to do it is to marry into a good family or to be on good terms with your own family or things like that, then it's a good play on your part.
Yes, absolutely.
To go through this process just so that other people will allow you to continue in that journey, rather than ostracizing you from it because of something that isn't even your fault and is kind of a silly ideal.
Yeah, it's more liberating, I think, because in China, those naive or traditional men are literally cursing this action. They say, oh, you're a slut, you're a bitch, why are you doing this? You even did it 3 times. Just something like this.
Yeah.
Sorry, so it's illusional. Illusional?
Yes.
Yeah, just wanted to get the pronunciation. So let's sort of maybe it would be good to like wrap up with some thoughts on this taboo of virginity. If anyone has sort of something they really want to say about this taboo, like maybe I could just start by saying that I think it's extremely interesting that the first, like the sex act itself, kind of, at least in ancient cultures and certainly in many religions, became such a sacred central point. And that's interesting because in the modern world, it's kind of vanishing as it's the function of virginity is vanishing in this way. And like, as many people have said, there are many different cultural practices which try to reanimate this sacred impulse, but it's like kind of comical the way sort of the traditional culture collides with the modern culture. And I don't know what it means deeply. Like the only thing I can think is that there's something deep in a transition to it, like even the end of humanity or something like that. Because if the taboo can be traced back to the origin of humanity and it's kind of vanishing, does that mean that we're losing the ground beneath our feet, so to speak? And I'm not putting any value judgment on that, just sort of interested in that, especially coupled with the phenomena that we've talked about, you know, online virtual sexuality and stuff like this.
After this discussion, I discovered that the meaning for me of virginity is a state of innocence in relation to sex and in sex. So it's a state of innocence, an embodied state of innocence. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to say that it's been really a ride. I mean, we got so like far off the original like focus interest, and it was really so like fascinating to see the whole discussion today. And yeah, I think that the basic like intellectual honesty and what I would call the Socratic epistemic drive itself compels or demands that we keep taboos like as focus objects. Like we need to question, why is there the taboo of this? Why is there a taboo that? And it's going to be tough and controversial, and the struggle never like is closed. It's always going to be like difficult for us because we are humans and we are like trying to think, and it's tough.
And how is the struggle with the food at home?
With the food is fine. The sex is the problem. Yeah, you know. But yeah, I would like to add to the Freud's like chauvinistic male order. I mean, it's well, losing virginity. I mean, didn't Freud think that it's probably traumatic also for the boy? I mean, men can be traumatized by losing virginity just as well. Just saying, and yeah, signing off.
Also, men can be traumatized by the woman losing her virginity.
Oh yeah, that's
what Freud was saying.
Huge, like
especially I know, if there's blood.
Yeah. I think it's so weird. Like for me, I know, yeah, we did go off topic, but for me, like I literally, my psyche doesn't care at all about a woman's virginity now. But like when I was younger, for some reason, my psyche was concerned with the woman's virginity, and all of these mechanisms were at play that he's describing. So I wonder if it's like, you know, in each individual, the maturation of the entire human species unfolds in some way. Like if, you know, like primitive man is very concerned with it, and then as you mature, you get more comfortable with it, and to the point where you just fully accept it, and its psychological significance diminishes, and maybe that a certain innocence, to use Alexandra's point, can be reclaimed in some way, to be innocent again, but just innocent after the process of knowledge, if we're going to couple innocence with sort of eating from the tree of knowledge kind of thing.
I see marriage as having that purpose, is trying to retain some of your innocence after the act of copulation and then also reproduction.
Right.
At least that's from my observation of all of the Christians in my family. None of the Christians in my family, which is all of them, are going to ever stop being Christian or ever divorce their partner. This seems to be more rare now that I've come to Canada, where I know lots of people whose parents are separated. But in my culture, it's like the number one goal is you stay together because you've just joined yourself under a higher entity, which will now protect you from whatever issues in your relationship you might have if you were just serving yourself. Right? So like the goal, it would seem like in Christianity and in Christian tradition, you're allowed to enjoy sex, but only within the confines of marriage.
That's the Christian strategy.
Yeah, and I often feel like the people who take pride in this enjoy it because they feel like as if they have retained some sort of innocence that people who don't follow these rules lose.
Yeah. I mean, it's a deep topic. I think, I guess in my head, like the sort of the true innocence would be, can that be achieved without marriage? Can you have the childlike approach to sexual energy without marriage and without falling into the nihilistic abyss of the sort of postmodern culture?
It's too all-consuming.
Mm-hmm. Well, it would require a very different type of subjectivity if it was ever possible.
I think it's possible on an individual level, and I feel like I see people moving towards it in small groups, like in little bubbles. But as a whole, I have no idea how we could apply this to everyone. Like it feels like the Christian tradition is a really good mass organization tool. But
yeah, no
I don't see how sexual liberation is a very good proponent of mass productivity or anything like that. I don't see it working that way anyway.
No.
But I'd love to hear anybody else talk about that.
Does anyone else have anything to say about virginity? Otherwise, we're at 2 hours, so I'm gonna wrap up. Speak now or forever hold your peace on virginity. No. Okay. So just to summarize, sort of
read a short quote that I put aside earlier today. It's from Lacan's seminars on Freud's papers on technique. He says that the freshness and vivacity of these papers is not surpassed by any of Freud's other writings. At times, his personality is revealed in them in so direct a manner that one cannot fail to remark it. The simplicity and frankness of tone are in and of themselves a kind of an education. So that's basically it.
I remember that passage from Lacan. I think it's actually one of the passages that motivated me to do this, because I think that, especially as like anyone here who's like an academic or an intellectual to different degrees, I think that reading Freud is a fantastic exercise because he demonstrates how it's possible to have a scientific mind, to investigate some new topic very clearly, and at the same time, you know, the style of his personality and the way he includes himself in his work is something that, in my view, is second to none. I've never really seen it done in the way Freud is able to do it. So, in any case, we covered the Taboo of Virginity today, Psychology of Love, Part 3, a paper from 1918. The basic idea that I want to leave you with is that the taboo of virginity is simply that defloweration presents a sort of paradox, and that paradox is that it binds a woman to a man very strongly, but it also unleashes very archaic, hostile impulses and reactions against him, which Freud explains with recourse to the castration complex, and that Freud sees the ancient taboos around virginity as fully justified in a psychological sense, because of this potential hostility and psychological fear of femininity, basically. And you do get a type of situation where Freud describes a type of historical teleology towards this becoming less and less of a problem in some sense, where at least our culture sort of erects less and less of a taboo against virginity. Of course, there are paradoxes which have been brought up in our conversation today about traditional culture still trying to retain this taboo, sometimes in comical ways. But I think the important point to reflect on deeper is that if women don't bring up, at least in a Freudian sense, if women do not bring up this complex in their own minds, that in some sense they retain a desire for revenge and a desire for an impulse for vengeance onto men in general, or specifically the man who deflowered them. So
what is that revengeance?
The revenge is the revenge that, as it relates to the not having the penis, basically. Oh. Like the revenge is the phallic revenge. And I would direct you for further reading onto the castration complex. If you go to, I don't know, I always recommend the site nosubject.com if you want to learn more about the castration complex, for example. But the revenge is basically this revenge
kind of like oppression, like this kind of oppressive feeling that you get from seeing James Cameron's 1984 Terminator. Like the Terminator is the oppressor here.
Not
like
I'm sure it's a spot on reference. Anyway, so without further ado, that was sort of the paper. Hopefully that was a useful workshop, and thank you all for joining me.
Yeah, thanks, bye.
See you guys later.